Our first presenter in this session is Simon Cook. And Simon is a middle school music teacher at ACS Cobham, and he's here this afternoon to tell us about his work developing oral literacy.
So good afternoon. I have been an ACS teacher since the dark days of the last millennium when I went to Egham in 1999. My two sons both went all the way through Egham and graduated a few years ago. But in 2010, I had the opportunity to move to Cobham. And the reason I chose to change campus was the opportunity that we have here to have a curricular instrumental program. So in the middle school, we have what for me as a Brit is an amazing opportunity to work with instrumental ensembles, which we call orchestras, in each middle school grade level. And that's a fantastic thing to be able to do. Before I proceed, can we acknowledge one more time these wonderful students? I'd like to be able to take the credit for their skill, but it's really their talent. Simon Ogundare and Sam Wright. And they played two tunes by one of my heroes. This is Hugh Masekela, who died just a few months ago. And when I was casting around for material for this sim project, he died, sadly. But that was an inspiration because I thought, oh, I know some wonderful tunes of his that we could do. So we'll come back to that. So musicians might be roughly divided into two categories. Some are fluent readers, but struggle with playing by ear and improvisation. Others are comfortable playing by ear and improvising, but really struggle with notation and sight reading. The idea for this sim project sprang from my personal musical journey, both as a learner and teacher. In the traditional classical training I received as a child, musical notation was very much the primary focus. After a slow start, I became a fluent sight reader and proficient in this type of musicianship while at school. By the end of secondary school, I'd achieved excellent results in grade 2 on 2 instruments, was playing concertos with the school orchestra, knew lots of musical literature, and felt pretty smug about it. Then I went for my gap year to the Royal Academy of Music, and I was brought up very short. In my first lesson with my keyboard harmony teacher, he asked me to play a well-known tune. He said, come on, play Happy Birthday or God Save the Queen. And I couldn't do that. I'd never actually been asked to play something. I mean, I could hear the tune very well in my head, but I didn't have the skill to transfer what I could hear onto the piano. And this is a very strange state of affairs. I could hear the sounds in my head, but somehow my thorough classical training had never taught me the skill of actually playing simple pieces by ear. And this is a common thing among classically trained musicians. I also remember being surprised around that time by non-musician friends who knew I was supposed to be an accomplished piano player, but who found that I wasn't able to play music unless I had a score in front of me. And quite symptomatic of this, musicians say, oh, where's my music? Where's my music? And what they mean is, where's my piece of paper with the notation written on it? And it's a strange phenomenon that the word music has come to mean the notation and not the sound. Now, historically, this was not the case. Up until the 19th century, improvisation and ear playing were the norm among classical composers and performers. Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, and Liszt were better known in their day for their virtuosic improvised performances than they were for their published compositions. Across a wider cultural and historical range, we see that oral transmission is not a particular feature of some music at certain times, but rather a universal characteristic of almost all music at almost all times. What we call oral transmission is what most human beings throughout history have known simply as music, something to play or hear rather than something to write or read. When I left university, I became very interested in gamelan. the Bronze Gong Metallophone Ensemble from Indonesia. And I was lucky enough to be able to study this, playing this music during the 5 years I lived in the Netherlands, and then for the 12 years I lived in Indonesia. I soon discovered that my notation-based skills as a classical musician were of little use in learning to play this music. Studying in Indonesia, I became immersed in an oral tradition which fundamentally changed me as a musician. The most significant part of this transformation was that I learned to play music by listening and responding to other musicians rather than by reading prescriptive notation. It had a big impact on me both as a performing musician and as an educator. The question of whether symbol should precede sound or sound precede symbol has long preoccupied music educators. Many teachers introduce notation very early on in the belief that beginners taught by ear will be held back from becoming proficient readers. That was the situation I personally found myself in. Others argue that just as in learning language, we have to learn to speak before we can read. So we need to be able to play and understand sounds before we can meaningfully decipher notation. James Mannering, who worked from the 1930s to the 1950s, was one of the first researchers to write about cognition behind music learning and to advance the importance of playing by ear and thinking in sound. He observed how it is common practice for instrumentalists to respond mechanically to written notation, to produce the notated sound, working from symbol to action to sound, rather than hearing the sound inwardly before producing it, i.e. working from symbol to sound to action. Traditionally, instrumental ensembles in schools, such as orchestras and concert bands, are totally geared to learning from prescriptive notation, i.e. written out arrangements with every part specified to the last semiquaver. This has enormous value in developing notational literacy, instrumental and ensemble skills, and polished performance, but it does less to develop oral literacy. This is the sort of thing I'm talking about. This is a score of, in fact, one of the pieces we played earlier, and everything is fixed. All the parts are fixed. This is what it looks like from Nate's point of view. Nate plays the trombone, and at the beginning he just plays a couple of notes, then he has to count 7 bars rest, 1, 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3. And then after 7 bars, he comes in with a long E flat in third position. Okay? This only gives a very partial picture of the piece of music. The focus of my SIM project is to explore how less prescriptive strategies for ensemble teaching, this is very prescriptive, yeah? How less prescriptive strategies for ensemble teaching might help student instrumentalists think in sound and connect what they hear in their heads with what they play on their instruments. The two approaches I've been experimenting with are playing by ear and using lead sheets. Now, Sam and Simon earlier learned that the last tune we played, Grazing in the Grass by Hugh Masekela, by the ear playing method. Zoe Lees generously invited me to come and work with her students in the high school jazz band. And this is how we started. Through the miracle of Bluetooth, we should soon hear it coming out of a bigger speaker. Connect. Connect. Only connect, EM forced to say. Okay, anyway, that would be wonderful if it worked. So we have a recording. We have a large group of people and with instruments, and we work on playing by ear. Now this ties in with research by a woman called Lucy Green, who's recently retired from the Institute of Education, where some of our guests are visiting from today. And her research question is, how do popular musicians learn? So people who play in bands don't read scores. They listen to recordings. They sit in their bedrooms. They work together. And she identified 5 key things that learners, what she identifies as informal learning, which defines them. So they normally choose their own repertoire. So they learn music that they've selected themselves. They copy audio recordings by ear without notation and sometimes without Bluetooth. They work with self and peer-directed learning, typically in the absence of adult guidance. So it's something which is driven by students together rather than someone like me telling them what to do. Informal learning has holistically and often chaotically acquired skills rather than those resulting from a curriculum progressing from simple to more complex material. And pop musicians have highly integrated activities of listening, playing, composing, and improvising. Now, traditionally, instrumental ensembles in schools, such as orchestras or concert bands, are totally geared to learning from prescriptive notations, like I showed you earlier. Now, the other strategy that I've been working with in my SIM project is the use of lead sheets. Now, a lead sheet is a good compromise between a very prescriptive written-out arrangement and learning a piece by ear. This is what a lead sheet looks like. And this is actually what Sam was looking at earlier when we played this beautiful tune by Hugh Masekela called Until When. And this, if a prescriptive written-out arrangement is a ready-prepared meal, this is a recipe. So it gives you all the ingredients and the method, but you have to cook the meal yourself. So up the top we've got chords, and we've got rhythm, a basic rhythm that the rhythm section is playing, and then the tune starts at letter A, and we've got a little counter melody there, and there's lots of little snippets of information embedded in this lead sheet. And I kind of stumbled on this by accident, because writing a long, elaborate arrangement for a band to play takes a lot of time. And I started giving lead sheets as a sort of quick and dirty way of getting a new piece out for a band to play. But then I soon discovered that there are all sorts of educational advantages to giving a recipe rather than giving a prepared meal, because students are learning about chords, they're learning about structure, they're also learning to play parts which they might not get to play. So Nate has a very boring trombone part there, but when you give him a lead sheet, he has the opportunity to play the bass notes, he has the opportunity to play the counter melody, and also as a rehearsal strategy, it's possible to rehearse things together. So let's all play the melody, or let's all play the bass notes, or let's all play these chords. You take the root, you take the third, you take the fifth. So because it doesn't give you all the information, it actually forces, it's a really good tool for teaching. Also, it gives students ownership of the piece because they have to take decisions about how to put the arrangement together. Lead sheets are something that grow out of jazz and popular music practice, but there's no reason why they shouldn't be used for other styles of music. So when Zoe Lees kindly permitted me to work with the chamber orchestra, I wrote a lead sheet based on a Schubert song. And actually it really lends itself to this. We've got a melody, we've got chords, and over the page, which we don't have, is the bass line. So I could get all the flute players to learn the bass line, which is something you would never do in a performance. But in terms of promoting understanding of the structure of the music, it's a wonderful thing. We got 3 notes there in the chord section. Many of these band instruments can't play 3 notes at once, but they learn about how chords are structured and so on. So Including oral literacy in our ensemble teaching methodology is a means of improving differentiation, since it takes better account of different learning styles, for instance, in giving those who perhaps find reading difficult but have a good ear the opportunity to excel. This approach is open-ended, not prescriptive. Working from lead sheets or by ear, students are more directly involved in the process of creating the music, since they need to make their own decisions on what to play. It leads into a hands-on understanding of concepts such as harmony and form, and in working from a recipe, students learn to cook. As music teachers, we aim to develop all-round musicianship, fostering both reading and oral skills. We learn language by learning to speak before learning to read and write, but we still need to learn to read and write. To say that sound should precede symbol in learning music is not to say that we should do without notation. In working with large ensembles, notation is of utmost importance, but it is not indispensable. So in this simple project, I've been investigating whether ear playing and open-ended musical prompts such as lead sheets might be useful to ways to enhance what students learn in ensembles and lift the music off the page. Thank you very much.